Welcome to the Red X series. Report, engage, decide. Featuring a presentation by San Fernando West Representative Faris Al-Rawi.
Trinidad and Tobago and to the wider world, I'm Faris Al-Rawi and welcome to the Red X. Today we come to carry on and continue the conversation on justice. You see, justice is something that people want, crave for, but justice is something that people believe is not balanced. There's too much view in this society that the big man gets away, that the small man pays the price. And for years, we've targeted the system without achieving a form of balance. So in our previous discussions, we spoke about making the place where justice happens work better. We talked about adding judges, we doubled judges. We talked about improving their conditions. We talked about adding processes in. We now do 20-minute trials. We talked about taking down the magisterial caseload where 95% of justice is managed from 146,000 to 8,500 cases per year, a 96% drop in cases, leaving magistrates to focus on the real issues of importance to people. We talked about 20-minute trials with judge only. But once that place is working as it is, as we've caused it to work, the point is, even though government after government has tackled crime by amending laws that really treat with what we consider to be hard crimes, sexual offenses, firearms, bail restrictions, anti-gang, those things, even though we as a government have also attended to that laws, for us, the real focus on tackling crime and balancing justice was to follow the money. Now, when we follow the money, we're looking to take the profit out of crime. That's like taking the lifeblood out of the corruption engine that exists in this country. So join me today on this analysis and understanding and appreciation of how we tackle crime at its root cause by taking away its profit. Let's get to the structure that we understand exists in our own society. Let's move to an ecosystem. What's an ecosystem? All of us understand the reality of how crime works its way out. We've seen people in bars, we've seen people in boardrooms, we've seen people in back rooms crafting deals, and it all starts with one person. That's a corrupt person. When you look at a corrupt person can really exist anywhere in our society. A corrupt person can be a politically exposed person, a politician, a public servant, a permanent secretary, a person in authority. Anybody who has the ability to give something is someone in authority. It can be a member of the law enforcement agencies of this country, be it customs, the police, immigration. It can be somebody who is intent on tax evasion, working with the Board of Inland Revenue. Could be a gang leader. Gang leader has authority, has a contract perhaps. It could be a drug dealer, selling by night, taking money. That person is corrupt. But a corrupt person only works with an accomplice. And an accomplice is someone that we must now figure out, how do we move from the corrupt person into the system of transferring that money. When we come across and we look at the movement from the corrupt person, there's always going to be a deal to be struck. You understand what a deal is? Somebody wants a contract, somebody wants a benefit. Well, that somebody, that corrupt person, has to talk to someone else. And that someone else is the accomplice who works into the contract and benefit. And that accomplice could be any form of person that has the contract or benefit from the corrupt person. This is not rocket science. We've seen it every day. It could be a banker who's hiding money for a politician in a different account. It could be somebody who has taken the contract in a public authority and is working to deal with the corrupt person. All of these people are the accomplices to corruption. And that's where we now have to understand where they put their money. And let's talk about where you put money. Money is something that can only be invested in 3 places. 3 things. And we know what they are. We live with them all day long. We put our money in land. We put our money in companies or businesses. Or we put our money in cash. So let's work our way through how we target the corruption between the flow from the corrupt person to the accomplice into where they put their money now. Land, cash, or businesses. And let's have a look at this progression. Let's look at what we did to follow that money. Let's move into the individual elements. So let's bring up on screen now. Land. Cash. Let's deal with these 2 things. Something that everybody understands. Something that every person who is in a family understands. I mean, your land is your most valuable thing. It's where your home is. It's where your business is. It's where your investment is. Your cash is the money in your pocket that allows you a certain lifestyle, allows you to pay your bills. So when we're looking at these things and we look at how cash is put away, cash can be in Trinidad and Tobago dollars. It could be in foreign exchange. It could be in a bank account. It can be in a casino. It can be in campaign funding or public procurement, because that's where cash goes. Then we look to land. And we talk about how you park proceeds of crime into land. Land has multiple areas. Land can in fact be in a registered or unregistered deed. And I'll explain that in a moment. It can be in the form of a trust. It can be in the form of a legal scheme. So let's get to the individual elements of those. And let's then look to how we interrupt those as we explain what those things mean. We translate the jargon. Let's go to the 3rd element first, which is the one that is outstanding. Now let's look at companies, business devices. Companies are a feature of life. A company is a legal person just like a normal person is. And a company can actually be owned by someone else, but you don't know it. You see, a company's owner is identified by who its shareholder is described to be. And the shareholder can be someone in a company that is unknown simply because the law didn't allow for the issuance of a share. The law did not allow for the real owner of a share to be identified. And that real owner is the beneficial owner. Explained quite simply, it could be in John Brown's name, but really owned by Jim Narayan or Jim Jones. And when we look at that beneficial owner, there has to be something to make you disclose it. Obviously, there's another type of shareholding, something called a bearer share. A bearer share is like $1. If you pass $1 into somebody's hand and they hold it, and you tell them it is theirs because you've paid them, they now own the dollar. A bearer share is the same way. It's a certificate in a company that has no name. Whoever holds it is the owner of the share. We then have something called a non-profit organization. We have billions of dollars every year, approximately $9 billion that the government of Trinidad and Tobago alone takes from the ministries and gives to non-profit organizations. They could be charities, they could be support factors, but if we don't regulate what these entities look like, the risk of corruption, the risk of abuse happens in great ideas, for instance, like life sport. I mean, what could be even better than saying, let's target at-risk youths. Let's take them out of suffering. Let's manage them into a structure of enterprise and put them to work. And so was born Life Sport. Started at $6 million, ended up at $500 million in money. And Life Sport effectively was a series of companies and non-profit organizations that received $500 million. And Trinidad and Tobago knows that tale well. Murder, death, destruction, corruption out of a good idea from a non-profit organization. So let's take our journey a little bit further in how solutions have been applied, not will be applied, have been applied by this government. So we have these devices. We have land, companies, cash. We just had a little quick conversation on companies and business devices. Now let's take a look at the cash. So you know that a contract can happen. It gets awarded from the corrupt person to the accomplice. And the deal is okay, $40 million is the real price. We want to take it at $80 million instead because there's some corruption inside of there. Part of it is paid in cash. You're going to put cash ultimately either in foreign exchange, the cash will be deposited in a bank accounts, or for some people in Trinidad and Tobago, it may very well be in a box or under a mattress or in a barrel. Quite simply, cash in your pocket, or if it's very, very large, one Carib container box will fit millions of dollars into it. So let's look at what happened here. Bank accounts, ultimately, cash, ultimately, you really don't want these things in your own name. I mean, the corrupt person can't surely be somebody who just takes the cash, goes to the bank account and puts it in his own name. Our existing laws sort of treat with that. You have disclosures and they may be looking at you. So what we wanted to do is to understand that ultimately, not only cash, but land also, if it's going to be transferred as a benefit, can't be in the name of the person who is the corrupt person. So ultimately, the land can't be in the name of the corrupt person. Similarly, if you're going to take the benefit in a company, the company shares can't be in the name of the corrupt person. And all of this, once put into effect, all of this then takes us into how the money flows. So let's take a little look at this. Let's look at this system. Corrupt person who may be a politically exposed person, a politician, a banker, a public servant, cuts a deal for a contract or a benefit with an accomplice in corruption. That accomplice in corruption and that corrupt person have their deal struck. Where they're going to put their money, they're going to have to put their money either in land, in a company, or in cash. Once it's in one of those three buckets, we know in the land, you can either have a registered deed, an unregistered deed, you can have a trust, you can have a legal scheme, and I'll decide those ideas in a little bit more precision in just a moment. You can have a company. A company has no issued shares. The shares are not in somebody's real name or the beneficial owner's name is not known. You have a bearer share warrant, no name on the share at all, or you have a non-profit organization. And cash is really quite simple. Cash takes you to the point of, do you have it in your pocket or in a bank account? Is it Trinidad and Tobago money or is it foreign exchange money? We take these three areas and then that transaction ultimately has to be so that the land is not in the name of the corrupt person, the cash is not in the name of the corrupt person or bank account not in the name of that person, or is the business in the name of the corrupt person. And when we take that position clearer, once it's not in the name of the corrupt person, you then see these yellow lines will show you that they want to get back into the corrupt person. Now that's how this thing worked in Trinidad and Tobago for years. You see, nobody bothered to understand that system. This government, attending to the fixing of the place of justice, quickening justice, reducing the load, doubling the capacity, hiring thousands of people, we said, listen, to take the profit out of crime is the trick to this all. Let's understand that. And I can assure you that for decades, people were just simply without the understanding for solution. What we did was to invest in a very radical form of solution by very simple approaches. It has not been an easy ride. Our opponents have resisted tooth and nail. They have fought against all of the policies that we put in. So let's show you what these solutions look like, bit by bit, in the areas land, cash, and companies as we take our way forward. Let's start off with cash. Everybody understands cash. Cash is something that we really want to make sure is something treated with, because he who holds the bill owns the cash. So let's look at the solutions to interrupt cash. And let's start off with the fact that the largest currency note in Trinidad and Tobago is the $100 bill. And what we did as we move forward into this solution for cash, I can tell you, we treated with cash in a number of ways. Let's get a little understanding of that. Cash is cash in a bank account. Cash is cash in your pocket. When we look at the cash in your pocket and you look at the $100 note, the key point was this. 8 billion Trinidad and Tobago dollars in $100 notes were in existence. We passed laws to amend the Central Bank Act and to amend the Proceeds of Crime Act and the obligations for disclosure. And we said to Trinidad and Tobago, you're going to have to bring in your $100 notes to the central bank, to a banking area, and exchange your old cotton notes for these polymer notes. $7.5 billion came back out of the $8 billion. $500 million just vanished. Let me ask you something. Who do you think was afraid to bring in $500 million in cash? We know when that cash came in that we saw some very unusual things. We saw that charitable money in a church, $34 million in cash existed there. We saw that barbering was now a great profession in Trinidad and Tobago, $1 million in cash. But what really is the trick is, where is that $500 million and why did it not come back in? You see, we spotted the suspicious transactions in the money that came in. That's under control. But the $500 million tells you that corrupt money did not come back in. Now, inside of cash, we're also looking at the interruptions. And if we take this inside of cash, because remember I explained to you a little while ago that cash is a little bit more than just in-pocket money. Cash also involves bank accounts. And when we looked at the bank account share of it, we have amended laws, first of all, to improve the Financial Intelligence Unit. In looking at the Financial Intelligence Unit, they are the ones that see the bank account money. They report the suspicious activities to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. The next one, we have a money laundering offense. It's in the Proceeds of Crime Act. And for years, it has brought nothing by way of prosecution because, quite simply, an indictable offense or a serious offense was too hard to achieve. So we made it an either-way offense, in the magistrate's court or in the high court. And in fact, we have already seized massive amount of cash transactions and monies in bank accounts using this split in the law. Bearer share warrants, mandatory share issue, beneficial ownership, these three things, if I explain them to you, are really to deal with how someone owns a share. A bearer share warrant, I've explained to you already, is that where that share is just in your hand, you own it. We quite simply cancel that ability for shareholding. There's no more any bearer share warrants. For non-profit organizations, Trinidad and Tobago now very well understands that a non-profit organization like a church can have $34 million in cash. And therefore, we have passed a law to make non-profit organizations be registered at law. They must be registered to operate. They must have accounts. They must be audited accounts if they're over $10 million in earnings, and that takes care of non-profit organizations. When we look to the issue of beneficial ownership, we passed a law which makes you have to declare who the real owner is. You see, Trinidad and Tobago understands this, you know. In looking at beneficial ownership, we know from the tales of corruption cases or the stories of people buying a property using a company, the company share is actually in one name, but the real owner, the corrupt person, is hidden. And that corrupt person is really telling that company, look, hold my money for me, hold my transactions for me, don't give it out just yet. I'll come and I'll get it later. That's why the beneficial ownership law means that if you don't say that the beneficial owner exists, you can never transfer the money from the accomplice to the corrupt person. That's just dead. That's gone. Very importantly, when we look to the other structures behind us, the Companies Act failed to require people to issue shares. In other words, then you could have incorporated a company and never say who the shareholder is. So you never trip the beneficial ownership law. We have now amended that law so every company must, within a certain time frame, issue shares so that you can no longer hide in a corporate vehicle the true proceeds of crime, just waiting for the corrupt person to come and take that away from you years later when no one is looking. We also did something very importantly with cash. And in cash, if you look at our screen here, you see we have foreign bank accounts. And in foreign bank accounts, transparency of tax holding information and tax discoverable information had to happen. That's where we're looking at the work that we've done for the international compliance, the Financial Action Task Force, the Global Forum, the United States of America. All of those are really foreign bank accounts. And we passed the laws with the opposition UNC kicking and screaming against all of them, demanding joint select committees, not agreeing to it. Public pressure had to be applied. Banking Association had to actually give way. All of those laws, FATCA for the United States, Global Forum for 190 countries, the Financial Action Task Force where we were blacklisted and then grey-listed, and now we've graduated. We passed laws, number one, to make the Income Tax Act such that the police, the DPP, and the Board of Inland Revenue could work in conjunction with the Financial Intelligence Unit as well, and that your bank accounts will be transparent for law enforcement purposes because a judge said so. Only because a judge said so. Secondly, we amended the Mutual Assistance in Criminal Matters Act so that we can actually extradite people, big people mostly, because that's where the large crime happens. That's where justice is not seen. The smaller man in society thinks that the big man in society is wealthy enough to get away with the crime. And this law creates a balance. The amendments to the Mutual Assistance in Criminal Matters Act so that we can extradite people to foreign countries where they are also wanted. And then we also ensured that we had a better regulation for confiscation of property by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And to do that, we had to ensure that we took away the secrecy provisions in the Securities Exchange Law, the Central Bank Act, the Financial Institutions Act, to name a few. All of those laws prevented a court from receiving a witness statement from a banker to tell what had happened. You see, it may not be known, as a government, we have had Norwich Pharmacal orders, production orders, and we've had warrants for the disclosure of information, all done by judicial process. We've caught criminals. High-ranking politicians are charged in the courts of Trinidad and Tobago as we speak for massive abuse. And when we look at that, it's that kind of information that becomes necessary, but there was a stumbling block. The secrecy provision said that you could not give a witness statement. So those laws were amended. And the opposition again, the UNC again, went kicking and screaming and refused to pass the law. But fortunately, these laws were simple majority laws and we were allowed to pass them. So the non-profit organization sector is where we treat with that money moving into what was unregulated. But as we come a little bit further, there were two little points further that we had to get to understand what was going to happen. And that is the formalization of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service in how they operate to deal with confiscation. And very importantly as well, the gaming sector. So the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, as we stand today, thanks to laws that have been put in place, and thanks to amendments that we have done and processes that we have put in, they now have a regimented structure for cash forfeiture. And that cash forfeiture runs from very large businesses into medium businesses, and where we find criminality in serious matters, unexplained stuff, they now have the ability to go to the Magistrates Court and get a forfeiture order under the Proceeds of Crime Act. But it's the gaming sector. Trinidad and Tobago, the world knows, thanks to the IMF, that we are the only country regulated by the IMF, looked at and assessed by the IMF, and in our assessment, we're the only country in the world that does not have a regulated gaming sector. We took the UNC's bill from 5 years ago, didn't change a word, brought it to the Parliament. They insisted upon a joint select committee. We did a full joint select committee with 2 international consultants, got the bill into full form, did all of the regulations, brought the report back to the Parliament, and the UNC refused to support 5 years of work that they engaged in the Parliament. And you know why? Let's explain why. You can walk into a casino, if it's unregulated, with millions of dollars, buy chips, start to gamble, stop gambling, take your chips, and give it to your accomplice in corruption. Imagine that. Walk in with $2 million, pass it through the account of the casino, and just give it to someone else. That's legitimate earnings. Who wins in that equation? Who wants to use a casino to hide money like that? But more particularly, the lives of the people that work in the casinos are what really trouble me. 17,000 odd people in the sector who can't open a bank account and can't receive a fair share of earnings in a regulated way. And I just simply say that that's a crying shame on the UNC for prejudicing not only Trinidad and Tobago, but the very smallest of people and the most vulnerable of people who are engaged in that sector. But we'll get that right. There's a fix to that. Let's go now into a different area. Let's see how the interrupter works in relation to land, because land is a big one. Land is something that we all understand. We live on an island. In an island, we have land which is limited in purpose. Our parents tell us that land is something that we need to cherish. It's something we can give to our children. We can go to the bank. We can mortgage it. We can take that money. We can educate ourselves, build a home. Land. It's what we're all interested in. So land in this country is regulated in a particular way. Land exists in 2 forms. It exists in a regulated system, which we call the old law, and it exists in something called the registered land under the RPA. That particular system of law, which is the Real Property Act, both of these 2 systems have been in existence since we were a colony, and then just after, as the amendments came in the 1800s. For decades, our land system was not changed or touched. Decades upon decades. And what we did as a government was to focus upon how you hide the proceeds of crime, follow the cash into proceeds of crime into land. And how did we do that? The first thing we did was to look at where the land is registered, how the records are kept, how we treat with that. Because our land registry was an antiquated old system. That land registry worked upon a manual system of old books records. A lawyer sends the deed down, it gets registered, it gets put into a big book. What we did at the company's registry, land registry, births registry, deaths registry, is we digitized millions of records. We scanned them. We doubled the capacity of the Registrar General in certain divisions. We moved the Registrar General from an old crumbling building at South Key to its new premises. We then went about getting all of the data digitized, all of the records put up on computers. We then installed new software and new hardware, and we, through the purposes of the IDB, developed a property business real estate solution. And that property business real estate solution, I'm very pleased to tell you, is up and running in final test point. The lawyers in Trinidad and Tobago have been a part of that, as they have been users until we go live. They've been testing the system. And with the amendments to the law that we have made, we are able to do all land registration electronically, able to pay for land registration electronically, able to receive deeds electronically, able to search deeds electronically. And thanks to the land amendment package, we are now going through zone by zone in Trinidad, and very importantly in Tobago, where the land title is very bad, to fix it by way of geographical information surveys, maps which are uploaded, and then we take that in a land tribunal process, a land adjudication process, and we give you absolute title guarantee. What does absolute title guarantee mean? It means you will never need a lawyer to ever check who the real owner of land is, because the government and the state will guarantee who the owner is, just like it happens in the United States of America. Those radical improvements allow us to follow crime, because in digitizing the records, we now know who owns it, who transfers it, but very importantly, let me explain to you how a trick that was being carried out for decades has been dealt with. And let's look now as we get to registration of deeds, new land adjudication, full title guarantee, and how we manage the real estate agents. So this registration of deeds, when you buy a property, this corrupt person and this accomplice to corrupt person, they come about and they say, right, we want to have a new system of hiding our money. That's what they say. Their system is, look, let's, instead of putting it in cash or putting it in companies, let's now deal with this by buying land. The corrupt person quite simply says, okay, here's the contract for real price, it should be $40 million. You, my accomplice, you'll get the contract. You charge $80 million. But you see that $40 million extra? I want that in land. Buy property for me. Obviously, the corrupt person can't put the land in his name. We've already explained to you how we've blocked the companies from hiding the real owner, so they can't use the company. We've already explained to you that he can't take that $40 million in cash because we've demonetized, we've passed the amendments to transparency, the foreign bank accounts can be found out. We've dealt with cash, but what about land? You see, the current law, as it stood when we managed it, and now that we have brought amendments to the law and we've passed it in Parliament and we will proclaim shortly, the current law allows you to buy a property, put it in your person's name, and never register the property. What does that mean? The corrupt person can receive the property in his name, if he was so bold, by just putting it in his name, paying the stamp duty, and never registering the deed. It's what you call an unregistered deed. It's a top drawer thing. You take the deed, the person signs, you pay them the money, they put it in the corrupt person's name, and they park it in a top drawer, and they never register the deed. So nobody knows. When you go to the registry, you still see it owned by the old person. That, ladies and gentlemen, that Trinidad and Tobago, that to the rest of the world has now stopped with the amendments that we've caused to the law. We have also said that you can't use a trust. And what is a trust? A trust is where that corrupt person says, John Brown will be the owner of the property in the registered instrument. But John Brown now does a trust agreement and says, I am a trustee for you, Mr. Corrupt Person, and I'll put the deed in my name. It's good in law, but you know, in Trinidad and Tobago, there was never a requirement that you had to register a trust deed. So that transaction became hidden. And that's what we did. We passed the law to make sure that trusts must be registered. Deeds must be registered. Now, we've spoken about cash, we've spoken about companies, we've spoken about land. What happens if all of that fails? Let's look back at where we are going on this ecosystem. Corrupt person, they have a contract or benefit, there's an accomplice who's in this. They go through cash, they go through companies, they go through land. We put some blocks along the way for cash. We've put blocks along the way for land. We put blocks along the way for businesses. What happens if it gets through? Because ultimately, they wanted this business to not be in their name, their land not in their name, or their cash not in their name, and we've dealt with that. If they get through this system, we have another area of protection. And that area of protection is what we need to look at next, because this is how we break it into further protection. And what is this further protection about? This further protection takes us to a number of techniques that we've done. I've already explained to you the radical improvements at the Registrar General's office. By the way, we're online. You can pay online. all of your deeds, your companies, births, deaths, marriage, everything is available online. And in September 2020, that's when the land registry goes fully online. The one that jumps out really, that everybody ought to be aware of right now, is civil asset forfeiture. And what is civil asset forfeiture? Civil asset forfeiture, explain your wealth legislation, is a radical tool to follow money and to take the profit out of crime. You see, we in this country understand that a big man who has held political office can get away, in our belief, because they believe that he's too rich to face the courts. We joke about somebody explaining how they built a home by saying, look, they built it with the money that came from a pumpkin patch and peas. Or somebody says that I have a massive mansion in Trinidad and Tobago and I earned it from my payment as a politician, for example. Those are jokes in this society. The civil asset forfeiture allows a tool called Explain Your Wealth. And Explain Your Wealth is where the police go to the courts, they knock on the door of the court and they say, listen, we have a public servant, we have a politician, we have a contractor, and we've checked their legitimate earnings, and it does not appear that their millions and billions of dollars that they have can be explained. Please, judge, ask that person to come and explain their wealth. I can tell you today that that law is not only in place, but we have multiple matters that are before the courts right now, including matters that are coming to court, which involve millions of dollars in assets that cannot be explained. And what happens? The court is allowed to make a forfeiture order, an unexplained wealth order, which will forfeit the wealth, and that wealth goes back to the government. You have the right to appeal, there is due process, but ultimately the citizens of this country get that wealth. And we can fix roads, hospitals, we can educate, we can buy medicine. That's where that becomes important. So that's civil asset forfeiture. The only entity to resist civil asset forfeiture in its many years was the UNC. They eventually said yes, but kicking and screaming under public pressure. Let's look to evidence and witness protection. Let's look to whistleblowing protection. Let's look to anti-gang laws, campaign finance, public procurement, Trinidad and Tobago Police, and the FATF. You see, evidence and witness protection is a critical aspect. I mean, you can't have a trial without an evidence-based approach. You need a witness. A witness is the person who will speak to the crime. When we look to a witness and we catch evidence in his position, we came to the Parliament and we brought an evidence amendment bill. That evidence amendment bill was a radical piece of law to provide witness anonymity. That is, if a witness feels that he or she is at risk of being killed, they are under threat, that the court, and only the court, can order that person's evidence to be given anonymously. It's not unusual. It's done in the United States, in England, in Australia, in New Zealand, everywhere except Trinidad and Tobago. Because the UNC, and in particular, a young man by the name of Saddam Hussein, who sits on the UNC bench, they refused in the Joint Select Committee, actually a special select committee, to support that law. And with that law, CCTV evidence was denied. And with that law, we also fell apart on witness anonymity. But the evidence that we have now, fortunately, because of the other things that I've just discussed, includes foreign tax accounts, local tax accounts, Board of Inland Revenue discovery, banks now giving witness statements, production orders, and materially, the fact that the proceeds of crime, money laundering offenses can be done in a magistrate's court or in a high court. When we look to whistleblowing protection, we know that story. Whistleblowing protection, the opposition refused to support whistleblowing protection. Whistleblowing protection was if you had evidence of an improper conduct, a person can come forward and give that evidence, and the law would protect that person from any detriment. They couldn't be fired, they couldn't be prejudiced, they could be protected, but the UNC said no to that law. We also have the fact that our amendments have gone a little bit away. We've taken the Anti-Gang Act, and in the face of the opposition saying no to the amendment we brought, we installed the fact that gang activity now includes white-collar crime. So if 2 or more people are engaged in money laundering, that's gang activity, because gangs engage in profit. We have, obviously, a number of other laws that we've passed. We've amended the Financial Obligations Regulations. We've amended the Financial Intelligence Unit Act. We've amended the Proceeds of Crime Act, the Anti-Terrorism Act to deal with terrorist financing. We've dealt with so many laws, but it's really what it means for you. And that takes us to a few other issues which are next on deck. And these issues take us to what's up on screen. We are dealing with the public procurement amendments. We're dealing with campaign finance reform, the transformation of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and then the international arena. So what's that about? Public procurement and campaign finance reform is something that the country has asked about for years. We passed a public procurement law. It took the president several years to appoint the regulator, and the regulator brought the final amendments to this government in June 2020, and the parliament ended immediately then. The amendments are ready to that law, the regulations are ready, it'll go. But what is public procurement law without campaign finance reform? Campaign finance is the twin brother or twin sister to public procurement. We have taken the campaign finance law, we've put it into Parliament. One of the strong points of observation and concerns about the law came from the Media Association, and we're going to take them into a joint select committee to understand how that law operates. It's a simple majority law and we can pass it. It's the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service that really is of material importance. For years, people want action from the police. The police give action by lightning action. You see the Commissioner of Police with an excellent unit called the Special Operations Response Team. We have specialist teams for domestic violence, specialist teams for child protection. But where is the thunder after lightning strikes? The thunder happens in court. And because of the government's approach in appointing the current Commissioner of Police, and because of the government's structure and financing of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the Commissioner of Police has been able to take the units in the police and better them. There is now a specialist investigation unit. That specialist investigation unit includes the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau, which used to be under the Attorney General's office. As Attorney General and as our Prime Minister agreed and as he directed, that unit was transferred away from the Attorney General to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Why? Because no politician should have a police force or police service under him or her. Secondly, apart from the ACIB, you have the Fraud Squad, then you have the Financial Investigation Branch, and you also have the Cybercrime Unit. That's all now one unit, and the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service now has a specialist white-collar unit. And you've seen it in the press, you now know of its existence. Forensic auditors, accountants, expert assistance and advice in law in particular, all in one unit, aggressively pursuing white-collar crime. The issue of the international world looking at us is equally important. The Financial Action Task Force and the Global Forum, each which are nearly 200 countries strong, said to Trinidad and Tobago under the UNC that we failed their assessment. It took this government and this Attorney General to sit to do the amendments to tens and twenties of laws to tackle white-collar crime, to tackle terrorist financing. Unfortunately, because of our excellent work, we are no longer on any negative, grey or black list. We have been given a clean bill of health by the Financial Action Task Force, and the Global Forum is the forum that we are fixing in the final stages thanks to the work that we have done. So ladies and gentlemen, Trinidad and Tobago, all of this comes to where? You have to get to the next position. After we get the ecosystem into gear, and as we come away from this slide and we move into the final points, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the Board of Inland Revenue, the Financial Investigation Unit, the Director of Public Prosecutions, the Civil Asset Trustee, the external law enforcement agencies, and the courts. All of these courts, if we come out of this bubble and we put it back to the chart and we get to the structures it's done, we now have the corrupt person wants to give a contract or benefit to an accomplice. That accomplice can only pass it through land or through a company or through cash. If we take the cash, they can only deal with it in Trinidad and Tobago dollars or in foreign exchange. They can put it in bank accounts, in casinos. They can put it in campaign financing. If we deal with land, you now understand that you could have land as an registered instrument or as an unregistered instrument. You can put it in a trust. You can put it in a legal scheme where you don't know where the real owners are. If you came to companies, you know that there used to be the fact that there was no legal requirement for issuance of shares. Beneficial owners weren't required to be detailed or disclosed. Bearer share warrants used to be in existence, or you had an unregulated non-profit organization sector. Let's go into the fact of the solutions. We've dealt with the solution for the land side of it. Robust new land registry, land package which gives absolute title guarantee. We went into the fact that you can no longer have an unregistered deed. We went into the fact that you can no longer have an unregistered trust. We now have all of these systems working well. We've regulated the real estate agent sector. We went into the solution for businesses. In businesses, we have seen better resourcing at the Financial Intelligence Unit. We've had all of the structures that I've just described. We're getting into the non-profit organization sector in removal of bearer share warrants, etc. All of these solutions applied. Cash in bank, you know what we did there. We dealt with the income tax amendments, the disclosure amendments. We dealt with the proceeds of crime, the Mutual Assistance in Criminal Matters Act, all of these things. But if all of those solutions failed, we went to the last aspect of it. And that's where we put in the civil asset trustee, we put in the whistleblowing, the evidence, we dealt with the gang activity in white collar, and that whole remedy down to campaign finance, putting in specialist units. All of this gives us a chance at stopping crime. Taking us now to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and law enforcement agencies, all having the authority to use these solutions as a mechanism to stop the corruption passing through land, companies, or cash. That means that this corrupt person in this yellow bubble of corruption is denied the opportunity to rob the taxpayers. And this means that Trinidad and Tobago gets justice. But this is a balance of justice. Trinidad and Tobago had a government that made the right choice in the laws. Trinidad and Tobago had the government that made the right choice for the right reasons. But Trinidad and Tobago knows that in making that choice, the focus was to make sure that there was a sense of justice carried out in a blind fashion, meaning justice must be blind to whether you're a big man or a small man. You see, that position where a corrupt politician, where a corrupt public servant, where a person in authority, that big person can get away simply because they're wealthy enough to have lawyers take you through decades of preliminary inquiries or trials, or just simply bribe their way out. This system of following the money writes that scale of justice. You see, if you go to our jails, you really won't find large numbers of white-collar criminals, large numbers of big people. Now I ask you, why does the UNC seem gripped by fear? Why does the leader of the opposition want to repeal all of these laws that I've just spoken to you about? You understand it in context. Why has Kamla Prasad Bisesa said to the country that she will repeal the laws to deal with land transparency? She will repeal the laws to deal with all of these structures. You see, you can't understand this in any real way unless you understand the system that has just been explained. These are good laws. This is passed for the right reason. It's the right time. This government can achieve justice, not only in the structures that we did, in fixing the place where justice happens, meaning the courts, and who's in it, and how fast they work, and what their load looks like. Not only in the laws that tackle hard crimes, like creating a sex offenders registry, or dealing with gang activity, or saying no bail for firearm possession for weapons of war, or dealing with the hard, ugly side of criminality, but very importantly, in the taking the profit out of crime and in following the money. And the only thing standing between the right choice and the balance in society is the UNC. Their dedication to saying no to all of these reforms is on the record of the Parliament. Don't believe me, go and check it. Go and check the debates yourselves. Understand that the right choice for Trinidad and Tobago is to continue this work. Understand that that's why I am in particular a large target constantly referred to by the UNC, because obviously they cannot be pleased with what has been produced. We don't speak about a crime plan in the PNM, we speak about an anti-crime plan. And this anti-crime plan has been well identified. It's not what we're going to do, it's what we have done. Now it's just time to make the right choice. The right choice is to vote for the PNM. The right choice is that on August 10th, 2020, we deliver Trinidad and Tobago into a brighter future with a balance of justice for all. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
On August 10th, vote PNM. Great is the PNM.